Old habits die hard. I'm Devin, I'm the media dietitian with Case Specific Nutrition.
And I'm Andrew Wade, I'm the founder of Case Specific Nutrition.
And it is the new year, which means that a lot of people are trying to develop new habits, but you're also trying to probably kick some old ones. And what you realize when you start doing this is that maybe these old habits don't die so easily. So today we're going to show you how to kick those bad habits, why they're so hard to kick, and then some of our personal stories of bad habits that we've had to stop doing. So the first reason why old habits are so hard to kick is because they actually served a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that most people don't really fully connect with, is that old habits do something for you, right? They have value in your life, and we are quick to call habits good habits or bad habits, but the reality is habits in general serve a purpose. And so the first thing that we need to look into if we're going to kick a bad habit or kick an old habit is to truly understand what was its purpose in your life. What problem did it solve? And I think a good one here is smoking. I think that's one that we can start with. A lot of people, in the new year say, I'm going to quit smoking, right? It's a terrible habit. I think most of us would agree that it's, on the surface level, it doesn't have a lot of value. But the reality is that nicotine is addictive, in part because it spikes dopamine in our brain. And without digging into the science too much, dopamine makes us feel good. And so most people smoke as a way to reduce stress levels, or as a way to escape, or a way to self-soothe. And so it's not surprising that someone says, I'm going to quit smoking, and they get through the first couple weeks where those cravings start to go down, and they get out of the withdrawal phase, and then 2 or 3 months into them having quit, life throws them a curveball. And normally when they would have that cigarette to go to cope, all of a sudden that's not there. And so they're left with this gap. And that becomes the issue. That's where relapse happens, right? Relapse happens in the gap. And so until you fully connect with, wait, what does smoking do for me? Why do I enjoy it? Or what value does it bring to my life? You're not going to be able to truly depart from that habit.
Yeah, so that's great to understand, right? These old habits die so hard because they really did provide some kind of value in our life, even if it's not something that we're necessarily proud of.
Yep.
So that's good to understand, but then what's the solution?
Yeah. And it goes back to kind of what we're building on here, right? That solution is step one, understand what that habit did for you. And then from there, learn to fill that gap with other habits.
Yeah.
Right? So if we're saying that in our smoking example that it was a coping mechanism, right? It was meant to help serve the purpose of de-stressing or escaping from something. We need to realize that you're always going to need to have coping mechanisms. You're always going to need to have outlets. And so we need to find new outlets that in those moments that spontaneously can be there for you. And a lot of times people look to healthy habits, whether it be exercise or whether it be, focusing on food or, meditation or yoga or those types of things, mindfulness practices. And these are all really good examples, but they're not the only things that exist. But what we have to keep in mind is they are sort of like the trendy replacements. The problem is this is just a giant list of things that you may not be that connected to. And so if we're talking about taking something like smoking that you've developed a relationship with in the form of a habit, and you have to replace it with something that you don't actually enjoy or look forward to or feel connected with, that's not going to happen, right? And so we've got to make sure it's something new that you really see and feel the benefits from.
Totally, absolutely. So that's good to know, right? If you are, trying to kick these old habits, they serve a purpose. So to kind of kick this old habit, maybe you have to replace it with something else that still fulfills that same purpose.
Yeah.
And it's easy to kind of just have these coping mechanisms. Sometimes you also have to deal with the emotions of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, things that we've done for a long period of time start to get really interwoven into who we are as individuals, right? It's something, it actually kind of starts to connect with our identity a little bit. And so we have to de-identify, but then we have to re-identify with something new.
Yeah.
And I will say that that is an iterative process. And what I mean by iterative is that it's not going to happen like that. Most people, they're like, I'm done doing this. And that's part of the reason why New Year's resolutions fail so frequently. Is it's meant to be this hard stop. It's complete cessation, no excuses, but it doesn't dig deep enough to really understand what are the ramifications of that thing leaving, right? What are the gaps that come or are exposed? So what ends up happening is, you get a week, a streak of time where you're actually cessation from smoking, or you've quit the bad habit, but then life inevitably throws you a curveball that you would have used it for, and that's when relapse occurs. But where people go wrong is they perceive relapse as a failure.
Totally.
But the reality is relapse is actually an exposure. It's a chance to learn. And so we've talked a lot about the growth mindset in the past, and this is a chance to use that growth mindset, right? If we have, say you're smoking and you have a week where you don't smoke and then something happens and you smoke. Well, what that just exposed you to is an emotional state that smoking was tied to. So you can go, oh, smoking is connected to this. What can I connect to it instead? And then the next time that thing happens, try that new thing. Maybe that new thing doesn't work quite as well, or maybe it's, you decide, oh, I'm gonna exercise, but you realize in the middle of the workday, you can't drop everything and go do a yoga class. Yeah. And so you go, oh, this isn't as adaptable of a habit. Part of the reason why a lot of our sort of more negative habits, like excess snacking and like smoking exist, is because they're super freaking convenient.
Totally.
Right? And so we can see where this is a learning opportunity. And so what I'd encourage, obviously for any of you out there that want to quit smoking, something to think about is if you do have that day where you end up lighting up, that's not a failure, that's an exposure to another connection smoking has to you, and continue to expose those, right? Work on your cessation, and when you have an event that causes a quote unquote relapse, go, okay, what was the emotion it was connected to? Let's find a new thing, and we kind of do this trial and error, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens is over time, you start to sort of snip the cords that smoking had with all these different emotional realities, and that means it becomes less and less connected to you, and new things become more and more connected to you, and that's how old habits die hard, and new habits start young, but they do build strong.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's time to get real.
Uh-oh.
We've got some bad habits of our own that we are ready to divulge with you. So who should go first? Should I go first?
I think you should go first.
Okay. So my bad habit that I'm super ashamed of is nail biting. It's gross. I hated it. So I was actually able to kick this bad habit finally at long, long last. And the way I actually did that was, again, it was serving a purpose. I was stressed out in the middle of the workday. Guess what? Your hands are right there. I didn't have to move. It was just super easy to just go for my nails. It's so gross, I hate it. But the way I was able to kick this habit was, so I started painting my nails first of all, because if you've painted your nails before, you know that you are not going to go biting them if you've already painted them. So that was step one, I removed that stimulus. I realized that the purpose it was serving was to kind of help me de-stress throughout the day, even though I wasn't consciously thinking about it as that way. And then what I did to replace it was I actually put some hand lotion on my desk. So when I was feeling like I want to go for the nails, I would just grab my hand lotion, put some hand lotion on my hands, and there was that kind of like opportunity for me to take a pause throughout the day, de-stress a little bit, and then get back to work.
Yeah. And notice, okay, oh no, but notice for your habits, what I want to call out is we talked about how people try and replace something with something that's like not as convenient or accessible. Mm-hmm. So you did just that though, right? Hand lotion is just as convenient as nail biting. Painting the nails is what we'd call like sort of what I like to call a flag, where it's like you're going to go bite the nail and that you see that color and you go no, like in slow motion, right? And so then it goes reminder, and that's what we call a flag. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can either choose to do the nail, which is the old habit, or you can do the alternative. But notice if she didn't have an alternative, if she had just painted her nails, and then she was stressed and needed to do something, something new would have had to come in, or the old habit would have had to come in. So she would have either been biting through that paint, right? Or there might have been a new habit that formed. But since there was that alternative of, ooh, this is where I use my hand lotion, so what you've done is you've flagged the habit you want to die, and you've encouraged or made accessible the habit that you want to thrive. And over time, it becomes, instead of bitten, chiseled nails, you've got pretty nails and super smooth hands. Boom, win, 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 win. This is the other thing I want to capture in yours, right? Is the new habits typically, if done appropriately, beat the old habit in some way.
Yeah.
And when I dig into my personal one, I'll show the same exact outcome. But it's that idea of instead of having a nervous habit where your nails were all bitten up and chewed up and your cuticles weren't where you wanted them to be, now all of a sudden your hands are in good standing, there's good skin, good nails, good cuticles, all of that. So we can hear where like the new habit was empowering, it built you up, where the previous habit literally tore you down one bite at a time. So
singular tear.
Okay,
your turn, let's
mine.
go.
Okay, let's put me in the hot seat then. So for me, one of my big ones was night eating. And it's something that's occurred, and I think a lot of people can relate to this one, which is why I'll expose it. And you might go, oh, a dietitian that struggles with night eating. And it's like, hey, I'm human too. But it's cool because night eating is something that definitely kind of popped in over the course of my life periodically. And if I look back on it, it always popped in high stress times.
Yeah.
And most recently, I would say it was actually last year where I had a period of time that was very stressful. Obviously, a lot of us have with the pandemic and all those things going on. But I had a period of time that was very stressful, and I was working ridiculous hours.
I remember.
I mean, we're talking 14, 16-hour days, sleeping very little. I mean, really just going at it in a way that I hope not to repeat again. But regardless, it's to say that I started this habit up where I was coming home late, and it was between when I'd basically get home from work and when I had to do a couple hours of emails where I would eat. And I'd overeat, right? And I would also eat foods that weren't particularly valuable to me. And my body started to really be negatively affected. I started to get heartburn. My sleep got disrupted. We could hear where this habit was breaking me down. It wasn't empowering me. But first I had to stop and go, okay, this is where old advice doesn't work. It's, if you're hungry at night, just eat celery, right? That was the old Weight Watchers trick.
Or just don't eat.
Yeah, don't eat.
And stop doing it.
And by the way, that's what a lot of people think working with a dietitian would be like, is we're just gonna be like, just stuff your face with celery, it's great, because that's what we do. No, that is absolute BS, that is non-functional, that is terrible advice. What we want you to do is step back and go, okay, why is this happening? Well, for me, I was working such intense days, back-to-back meetings, no breaks, that I wasn't eating during the day very much. So my breaks in the day to eat good quality food that served as a break for my brain and nourishment and made me feel good, I was plowing right through those, which means my energy levels were burning as the day. And then from there, all of us need downtime. I wish that I was the robot that the world kind of maybe thought I was for a weird period, but the reality was that having 1 or 2 hours to myself during the week at night just was not enough. And so what I was doing with the food is I was trying to consolidate and condense a whole bunch of happiness into a small period of time. And so I was getting home, trying to have this period of time where I took a deep breath before I did emails, and food was this quick, convenient thing. But what we can hear is, again, led to heartburn, led to me having disrupted sleep, affected my body in a negative way. I wasn't hungry in the morning, so then I wasn't eating breakfast. Became this perpetual cycle. And so as the dietitian / habits person I am, I saw it. I kind of had to step back and recognize, okay, the root cause of this is that you're a freaking workaholic, right? You work too much. You don't have good boundaries of self-care, which is hilarious because you spend 12 hours a day talking to people about self-care.
That's
crazy. Let's call that out, right? And so step one was to realize that I had to work less. That's when you own a business, when you have all these demands and you're working on learning to delegate, that takes time. And so that wasn't the fast solution, but that was the inevitable thing that needed to take place. And so I was kind of strapped with this realization of, okay, this is a symptom of me working too much. This is a symptom of not having enough time for self-care. And so I said, I need to work less, and I started working on my schedule. And that took about 6 months to wind down to be appropriate. During that 6-month span, though, I knew that night eating wasn't the solution. So I started going, okay, what's gonna replace coming home, plopping down on the couch for a second, getting that exhale, watching something pointless, and enjoying my favorite foods. And I went, I'm gonna have to bundle some things, right? This isn't gonna be just like, you're definitely not eating celery, but we're definitely not just doing one thing to replace this. So I created what I call my Rottweiler bundle. So for anybody listening that doesn't know me, I have 2 massive Rottweilers, Apollo and Axel, one of which is actually at my feet right now because they don't tend to leave my wife and I's side. But it's to say that they are one of my favorite things in the world, right? They are instant happiness, and if you know me at all, you know that I'm kind of a dog dad and I'm pretty obsessed. So I knew that when I got home at night, how excited they were to see me, interacting with them. That was a huge dopamine spike that made me feel really good. And so what I started doing to break the habit is instead of coming in, lounging on the couch, first I started packing my food again. So I set it up so that I had dinner at work. I made it so that I forced myself to eat a dinner, which meant like the meeting, if there was a meeting during dinner, guess what, that meeting's gotta wait. So I drew a boundary for myself that gave me some breathing room. And that set me up not to be as hungry going into the night. But then when I got home, instead of going into the living room, plopping down, I went up to the bedroom and I took a hot, long shower to kind of like rinse the day off, right, and kind of reground myself. And then I snuggled up in the love sack with the Rottweilers, and sometimes I'd lay on a back massager and then I'd watch something on Netflix. So instead of being downstairs trapped by the lure of the living room and the kitchen, being upstairs, snuggled up in a love sack with two snuggly dogs that want pets and love, watching a show on my phone. What ended up happening is that bundle of those different enjoyments became a better way to wind down. And what started happening is I started falling asleep earlier. I started sleeping more soundly because I didn't have a full stomach of food, which means I started waking up a little bit earlier. My appetite in the morning came back, so I started eating breakfast again. That breakfast energized my day, so then I was able to spread my food out and I prioritized my meals better. And it became sort of that, wrench that you put in this vicious cycle trending this way to reverse it and make it this prolific cycle.
Yeah.
And so old habits definitely can die hard, but you can transition them by finding not maybe just one thing, but a bundle of things as well. And that's what worked for me.
That's what I love about your story so much, is that not only did you get to the root of the bad habit, you uncovered another bad habit underneath it all, which was maybe you working too much. So yeah, it would have been easy to just kind of replace that stimulus of night eating with, the Rottweilers, which I love. I think that's a great solution. But you also uncovered the root bad habit, which was working too much. And you've scaled back that a ton, which I'm super appreciative for. I think that was fantastic. So that's it. Old habits die hard because they serve a purpose. So in order to really kick that old habit for good, you have to discover what the purpose is and then kind of replace something with the similar stimulus.
And don't be afraid to take that time to step back, look at that habit, what is it connected to, and don't be afraid to think about, okay, do I need to change something at a bigger level? And that's really what we are here for, and also we should note what therapists tend to be really good at too, right?
Absolutely.
And so that care team can be a useful way to kind of see your life through different eyes so that we can point out like, oh, it seems like that work-life balance is off, or it seems like you skipping lunch is leading to this, or you're not getting a break in the day and that might be causing this burnout. Sometimes it's hard to see why this habit is thriving or why it's necessary. And sometimes you can, just like you talked about, sometimes you can change the environment so the habit is no longer necessary. And then sometimes you can replace that habit. And a lot of times it's just a combination of the two that sets you up to really truly live better.
Yeah, absolutely. So old habits die hard, but that doesn't mean that you can't kick them. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe below. You can also follow us on Instagram at Case Specific Nutrition. Visit our website, casespecificnutrition.com, to get connected with a dietitian that can really help you with these habits and developing new ones.